What's good, YouTube? Super Insane 18 here, coming at you with another live duel. We have myself piloting Dogmatika Nekroz versus George, who's going to be piloting Pure Burning Abyss. This game was actually filmed a little while ago, but due to being sick, I wasn't really feeling up to voicing over it. I was having quite a bit of issues with my throat and coughing a lot, but now that we're better, we're here, we're going to roll with it. We see that George actually wins the dice roll, and he is going to open up his turn by normal summoning a copy of Tour Guide from the Underworld, but unfortunately for him, I do have a copy of Infinite Impermanence to negate its effect. That leaves George with not anything left to do, so he does pass over to me, and I am going to go off, activating a copy of Nadir's Servant, sending Necroz from my extra deck to the graveyard, and I believe here I do add a copy of Ecclesia. Alright, so it looks like I actually added the Maximus. That means I must already have the Ecclesia in my hand. I am trying to play around any sort of hand traps, like maybe if he's playing Duel and Lockbird. So I did have the Ecclesia, I normal summon it, and I used this effect to search a copy of Fleur-de-Lis from my deck to my hand. And with that, I am going to reveal the Maximus, banishing the copy of Necroz from my graveyard to summon it. Using its effect, I am going to send two from my extra deck to the graveyard. I'm going to send Herald of the Arclight and Titanclad. George sent double Dante, that way he can use their effects to just send them back to the extra deck, really not losing any sort of initiative here. I'm going to activate the effect of the Herald to add a copy of Necroz of Colossalus to my hand. And then I'm going to activate a copy of Pre-Preparation of Rites, adding a copy of Necroz of Brionic from my deck to my hand. This actually gives me pretty much everything that I need for my Necroz portion of the combos. So I'm going to use the Colossalus, accidentally spill my deck over onto George's side of the field over there, and using the Colossalus I am going to search a copy of Kaleido Mirror. This will allow me to send another card from my extra deck as the material for a ritual. Using the Brionic, I activate it and search for the Necroz of Unicorn. This will lock George out of any sort of extra deck monsters. And the reason that that's important is because using Kaleido Mirror, I can send another copy of Herald, summon out the Unicorn, and Herald will activate, getting me another search. Here I add the Necroz of Valkyrius, just so that I can stop any sort of battle phase shenanigans that George might want to do on his turn. And swinging with both the Ecclesia and the Unicorn, I put him down to 4,200 life points. And in the end phase, I will activate the effect of Titanclad, and if memory serves, I add another copy of Ecclesia, which it looks like I do. And that will be George's turn. Starting off his turn, he is going to normal summon a copy of Graf, and then reveal Alec to special summon it. He is going to be linking both of these off into a Cherubini, but it looks like he might take a bit to determine if that is the best course of action for him. Okay, so before doing that, he actually summons a copy of Rubik, it looks like. Then he links away the Graf and the Alec into the Cherubini, activating the Graf effect, and it looks like he tries to activate the Alec, but I correct him because it was special summoned with its own effect, so he cannot use it. So just resolving the Graf effect, he summons a copy of Farfa. Farfa is important here because he is locked out of extra deck effects, so he does need to get rid of my Unicorn as soon as possible. So, using both the Farfa and the Rubik for a Synchro Summon of Virgil, he is going to activate the Farfa effect and use it to banish the Unicorn until the end phase. Then he will activate the effect of Virgil to try and get rid of my Maximus, but I do have a Fleur-de-Lis to negate. Since he pitched the Libic for the effect of Virgil, he is able to use it to summon the other copy of Graf from his hand, and then he uses the effect of the Cherubini to send Seer. Seer's effect is going to activate here, and it looks like he went for the Farfa on the resummon. I guess he's trying to determine whether or not Dante or one of his other rank 3s would be the best course of action here. It does look like he goes into the Breaksword, which is actually a very good option, and I do check here because I wasn't 100% sure on the card effect. Because the Cherubini points to it, it is not destroyed, and for the effect of Breaksword, he does not need to destroy both of the targets. So by targeting himself and my Maximus, he's able to get through both, and then he enters battle and swings with the Virgil. But I did plan ahead for that. I do have the Valkyrius, and that will end George's turn. I did forget to bring the Unicorn back, so I just do that on my standby before anything else happens. So I activate another copy of Nadir's Servant. This is actually going to send my Psyframe Lord Omega, and that will allow me to add another copy of Ecclesia. Now, I do already have one Ecclesia in my hand from the search at the end of my turn last turn, but this will allow me to use the effect of the Omega to put the Maximus back in my deck, and then by special summoning the Ecclesia here, I can just use its effect to research that Maximus immediately. Then I can banish one of the Heralds from my grave to resummon my Maximus, and that will allow me to send 2 more cards to my graveyard from my extra deck. Here, George is going to do the same thing that he did on the last turn and just send Double Dante to activate both of their effects and add cards back to his hand. I am going to send, I believe, Natis and Totally Awesome, again, if my memory serves. The Totally Awesome will allow me to recover one of my Necroz cards, because anytime it's sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 water. Thankfully, all of the Necroz are water, which is where kind of the synergy for both of these decks come into play. Natis is going to pop the Breaksword here since it is no longer protected thanks to Unicorn negating the Cherubini's effect, and the Toad is going to add back the Valkyrius. Because there was a Graph underneath the Breaksword, he does use it to summon out a Skarm, and unfortunately this is where I make a relatively big misplay. I do have enough on board to game George, however, because I was so hung up in not letting him get a Skarm search because Tour Guide is now at 3, I'd try to play around it by leaving the Skarm on field. Had I just attacked the Cherubini with literally anything else on my field, the Unicorn could have taken out the Skarm, and then I could have swung for game with the rest of what was on my board. So unfortunately, I did kind of have a missight there, but it happens, you know, you get in the moment and there really isn't much else you can do or say. It happened, we acknowledge it, we move on. But with that being said, there really isn't anything left for me to do. I'm trying to see if there is anything, but ultimately there's not, so I end up passing my turn to George. Now, George is trying to determine what his best course of action is here. I do have quite a bit on board. He can maybe get rid of my Unicorn if he has a way to cycle the Farfa. But that being said, I do still have the Valkyria, so there's no way he can get over anything by battle. Overall, he's just in a very bad position here. So we do see that he activates a copy of Foolish Burial, and he is going to use that to send a copy of Seer. With Seer being back at 2, that allows him to have the extra copy he needed to do that, and he does use it to resummon the Farfa. Actually, it looks like he takes the Farfa back and goes for the Graph, opting to link those away and then get another copy of Farfa out of his deck, maybe, by using the Graph to summon it and then maybe linking it away with Cherubini or whatever other rank 2 he might be thinking of making here. So we do see that he puts the Cherubini out, and then he is going to activate the effect of Graph. Graph is going to summon the Farfa, which is exactly what we thought, but I'm not quite sure where George is planning on going from here, honestly. Alright, and it does look like George can no longer determine what he wants to do, so he scoops the game and we move on to Game 2. Now, starting Game 2 here, I am going to end up going second. George will opt to go first because he lost the last duel, and we'll see if maybe he can get a little bit of a better start here. So to start off his turn, he does normal summon a copy of Graph, and then reveal a Libic as a special summon. And looks like he might be thinking about what he wants to do again. Unfortunately, with Burning Abyss, there is so much you can do that there's never just one linear correct play. You do have almost an infinite number of options. So it does look like he goes for the Cherubini, activating the effect of Graph when it hits the graveyard, and he's going to summon out a copy of Skarm. Now, using the Cherubini, he sends the Seer to resummon the Graph, making the Dante by overlaying both, detaching the Skarm, and milling 3 for cost. I don't see what he milled here. Unfortunately, it is slightly blocked off by the layout, but the important thing is that he was able to mill the Skarm, which lets him get a search in the end phase. Thinking about setting 1, he decides not to, then going to his end phase activates the effect of Skarm to search a copy of Tour Guide. Now that it's my turn, I draw for turn, and I activate a copy of Reinforcement of the Army. Now, this is going to allow me to search for a Necroz of Clauselus, but unfortunately for me, George has a copy of Droll and Lockbird. Now, if I had maybe had a Siphon Gear Gamma, I could have stopped that, but Droll and Lockbird is so powerful against this deck that it does just end my turn. I pass over to George, and it looks like this is going to be an embarrassingly short game for me. He normal summons the Tour Guide, I have no response. Activating the effect, he can summon one of his Burning Abyss monsters from his deck. Let's see which one he opts to go for. Looks like he summons the Libic, which means that he probably has something in his hand that is very threatening to me, something that he wants to get on the field. Using the effect of Dante, he mills 3 for cost, detaching the Graph. This will allow him to not only pump up his Dante by 1500 attack, but the Graph effect will activate, and it looks like he milled a Barbar, which will activate as well. Banishing 3 monsters off of the Barbar effect, he is able to inflict 900 damage to me. Looks like he banishes a Calcab, a Skarm, and a Libic. That puts me down to 71, and then the Graph will activate in the same chain, and he will more than likely bring out a Seer, but let's see what he does. Okay, so it looks like he actually brought out a copy of Cagna. I'm not sure if maybe he's just out of Seer, or if there's one in his hand, and that's why he summoned out the Libic. But he did go for the Cagna. Now he's trying to determine if everything on board is enough to game me. Unfortunately, it is not. Cherubini, while a very good card for the Burning Abyss strategy, is laughably small when it comes to attack. Activating the Cherubini effect, he sends a card, that way he can pump up his Dante just a little bit more, and then between the Boral Sword, the Dante, the Tour Guide, and even a second Boral Sword attack that he didn't need, he is able to push for game. Revealing my hand here, we see that I had everything, I just unfortunately got Droll and Lockbirded, but that's how it is sometimes. We're going to scoop it up and move to Game 3. Alright, so moving on to Game 3 here, we are going to see that I actually opt to go second, allowing George to go first. With this being filmed so long ago, I can't tell you exactly what my thought process was behind this. I do believe, though, looking back on it, that I was thinking I can probably side better for going second, and I do have a better ability to play through whatever board he can set up, with the fact that Unicorn is just able to blanket negate any extra deck monsters. George does open up with a copy of Tour Guide from the Underworld. With no responses, he is allowed to resolve the effect, and he does summon a copy of Graph from his deck. Using the Graph and the Tour Guide, he is going to summon a copy of Cherubini, and with Cherubini's effect, with Graph's effect, he is going to be able to summon another Skarm from his deck. Using the Cherubini, he sends a Seer. Seer reborns the Graph, and making a Dante using both of those, he detaches the Skarm to mill 3, and unfortunately here he hits, not the greatest. He does hit 2 traps, which is a little bad for him, but he is going to be able to get the Skarm in the end phase, which is very beneficial for him. We see here that he is going to discard a Burning Abyss monster to make a copy of Beatrice over his Dante, and then proceeds to end phase and uses the effect of Skarm to add a copy of Tour Guide. Now, that isn't the strongest board, the only real interaction he has is a Beatrice, so I'm feeling pretty good. I do open up with a copy of Dark Ruler. Unfortunately, might be a little bit of a waste using it on just a Beatrice, but that Beatrice can really put a damper in my combos, so it's really just better to get rid of it than have to worry about it. I activate a copy of Reinforcement of the Army, and I do search for a copy of Clauselus. Now, if George has the Droll here, he can definitely use it to shut me out. However, I spoke with him after the match, and he did say that he was scared of me siding in Gamma. If he Droll and Lockbirded there and I had the Gamma, it was pretty much just a hard loss on his part. The Beatrice was turned off, I didn't have any monsters on my field, I could use them to any sort of link, or I could use them to make the Omega, so if he had it, he held it. Using the effect of the Clauselus here, I am going to search for the Kaleido. This means that I will be able to do the same thing that I did in our first game, sending the Herald to just summon out a copy of Unicorn. And it looks like I'm activating pre-preparation of Rites, picking up my extra deck for some reason, but I do correct that and go for the Bryonic, same thing that I did on the first game. So here I will be able to use the Necroz of Bryonic to search for any Necroz monster, and if I remember correctly, I did already have the Unicorn in my hand. So, discarding the Bryonic, I am going to add a copy of Necroz of Trishula from my deck to my hand. Now, this is really good because I do have the opportunity of potentially ripping out the Tour Guide, as well as getting rid of his Beatrice without letting him get the Fusion Dante. Activating the effect of the Kaleido Mirror, I am going to send a copy of Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard. This will allow me to summon my copy of Unicorn, and then activate the effect of Herald to get a search of either a ritual spell or monster. Here I'm going to add a copy of Necroz Mirror. This means that I have another ritual and spell in order to summon out the Trishula. Using a copy of Shuret, since it counts as the full summon, I am going to summon out the Trishula, and then activate the effects of Trish and Shuret in a chain, resolving the Shuret first to grab what looks like another Bryonic. Then with the Trishula, I will banish the Beatrice, the Graph, and unfortunately looks like I hit a Fiendish Rhino Warrior. But then I can swing over the Cherubini and attack with the Trishula, and he should be at lower life points here, but being a friendly game, he did forget to activate some effects, and I did kind of just shotgun into battle phase, so rather than hold that against him, I just let us go back a little bit. So the Unicorn is still going to run over the Cherubini, but he does get the effects of the Burning Abyss monsters that were sent to grave. He is going to summon out a Libic and be able to add a Seer to his hand, so I'm going to swing over the Libic with the Trishula, and he's going to use the Libic effect to summon out Farfa. That pretty much ends my turn, so we see George draw here, and to start off his turn, he's going to go ahead and normal summon the Tour Guide he added off of the Skarm last turn. Again, I don't have any responses, unfortunately, so he is going to be able to resolve the Tour Guide effect. And it looks like he summons out a copy of Seer. Now, this is going to be really good for him because he is going to be able to recur a ton of resources from his graveyard now. Using the Seer and the Farfa, he makes the Cherubini, and he's going to activate both of their effects. The Seer is going to target what looks like the Graph, and then the Farfa is going to get rid of my Unicorn. George here just thinking about how to progress now that he's no longer locked out of his extra deck. Looks like he's taking a bit to just look over his cards, see what he has, figure out his course of action here. Looks like he's going to overlay the Tour Guide and the Graph into a copy of Dante, using the Dante effect detaching the Graph to send 3 cards from his deck to his graveyard, and he is going to activate the effects of Everything Sent. Looks like Kagna is going to send a copy of Good and Evil, and then Graph is going to summon a copy of Barbar. He summoned, it looks like he took that back. So he is going to summon another copy of Farfa. Then he's going to use the Cherubini to send the Barbar instead, using that to pump up the damage on Dante so Dante can run over the Trishula without issue. And then he's going to activate the Barbar effect, but I believe here he only sends 1. And it looks like I'm correct here, he just decides to banish the Skarm, which means the Barbar will only do 300 damage to me off of its effect, but there really wasn't anything else in his graveyard that he really wanted to get rid of, so all things considered, since he was mainly using it to pump up the attack of the Dante, it really doesn't matter. Using the Dante, he swings over my copy of Trishula, and then he attacks me directly with both the Cherubini and the Farfa. Proceeding to main phase 2 here, he is going to set 1 card from his hand, and then go to end phase activating the effect of the Skarm in his graveyard that was sent this turn to add his 3rd copy of Tour Guide. Now, unfortunately, I draw for turn here, and I do have a pretty big misplay. I forgot to put the Unicorn back to my side of the field on the end phase, and because I have no monsters, I activate the effect of the Kaleido Mirror in graveyard. As if that weren't bad enough, I then realized that I forgot to bring the Unicorn back, and again, being a friendly game, just put it on the field. But I still decide to resolve the Kaleido Mirror, which was technically an illegal activation, because I would have had a monster on my side of the field. Neither me nor George, or even my roommate, caught that because he was in the background watching, so we just kind of let it go through. Thankfully, it didn't really change the outcome of the game. You'll see in the end, whether it's me or George that wins, that particular play isn't the reason, but it's definitely a big misplay nonetheless. So we'll see here that I used the Notice off the Extra Foolish to get rid of George's back row, which was an infinite impermanence, and then using the Kaleido Mirror, I unfortunately make another misplay, sending a level 7 Synchro in order to summon my Bryonic. Now, thankfully, this is something that can definitely be kind of retconned. That particular Synchro monster was only in there as a level 6 target, so if I were to replace that with a white or a dolphin, it doesn't make any sort of difference. Using the Bryonic effect and my battle phase, I'm able to clear his board, but unfortunately it is not enough. Passing the turn to George, he normal summons the Tour Guide, using its effect to summon a copy of Libic. Linking both away into yet another copy of Cherubini, he's going to use the Libic effect to summon the Farfa, and then by specialing another Burning Abyss from his hand, he makes the Borrelsword Dragon, using the Farfa to banish my Unicorn. This is going to allow George to go for game. He is going to resummon the Dante off of the Seer that went to Graveyard, and with the attack of the Borrelsword into the Bryonic, and the Dante and the Borrelsword, that seals up the game.